Reading with your kids.
Hey, so great to see you. Come on in. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted that you're part of our Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you find your podcast. We have a wonderful guest for you today. If you are hungry, you don't want to miss this episode. Our guest is Pierre Lamielle, and he's going to be telling us all about his Munchy Munchy Cookbook. Before Pierre joins us, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by With the Courage of a Mouse, the Superhero School Series, Book 1 by Donna Sager-Cowan. Cat the cat wants a home, a family, and friends she can count on when suddenly she finds herself in Sweet Meadows, a long way from the alley she calls home. Cat discovers she can talk, but she can't decide if she's dreaming or dead. Simon is a mouse, and he is having the worst day ever. Instead of celebrating his first day at superhero school, he's on the breakfast menu twice. A hawk considered him an easy meal, but quick thinking changed that. Now a cat wants to pounce, but not if Simon can help it. With a quick plan and a matchstick, Simon speeds towards certain death. Will he arrive at superhero school? Join the entire superhero school gang for their first adventure with The Courage of a Mouse, the Superhero School Series Book 1, a middle grade chapter book for ages 7 to 12, focusing on courage, friendship, and finding the superhero inside all of us. This series touches on common life themes and challenges with humor, patience, and self-improvement techniques. It's the Superhero School Series with The Courage of a Mouse by Donna Sager-Cowan, available wherever books are sold. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Kid Curated Books. I love this. This is really a great thing for families. Kid Curated Books is an online service that offers monthly book box subscriptions for children ranging in age from infants to teenagers. Now, before you go getting an attitude like rolling your eyes and saying it's just another subscription box, let me tell you how Kid Curated Books is different. Check it out. Kid Curated Books doesn't just send each child the same tired old book box. In fact, seldom are two boxes ever identical. That's because the folks at Kid Curated Books understand that no kids are identical. Based on a survey that you and your child complete during the initial subscription process, and based on subsequent feedback from the kids, Kid Curated Books creates a custom book box designed especially for each child that will engage, excite, and yes, even educate them. Each monthly delivery arrives in a colorful box that is packaged like a present and addressed directly to the child. Kids love that. Subscribe to Kid Curated Books today, and we will provide amazing reading for your kids no matter what their age. Are you not ready to commit to a subscription? That's okay. Kid Curated Books also offers an array of gift boxes for baby showers, holidays, and birthdays. Check it out today by visiting their website, kidcuratedbooks.com. And we also want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by one very large and cranky Tyrannosaurus. That's right. The last surviving dinosaur, the Tyrannosaurus, written by Stephen Joseph and playfully illustrated by Andy Case. We love this book. This book tells the tale of how the dinosaurs became extinct. And we're not talking about the life-ending meteor shower the paleontologists often cite. Nah, that's like boring. The Tyrannosaurus is so cranky that she makes all the other bigger and meaner dinosaurs disappear. That is, until she comes across the only dinosaur who is immune to her incessant complaining, the Tyrannosaurus. These two dinosaurs evolved into humans, and that's where cranky people come from. Throughout the illustrated book, family members and dinosaurs humorously battle to have the best sources. Now that's a Yiddish word for big, really big problems that include warts, alligator attacks, and brain tumors. I mean, poor cousin Dottie grew an entire forest on her feet. Oi! The best part of this very funny book is that it's not just for cranky kids. As the storyteller says in the end, even mommy and daddy can be crankosauruses and cavechosauruses sometimes. Everybody has a bit of Tyrannosaurus and Tyrannocavechosaurus in him or her. The last surviving dinosaur reminds readers to be mindful of when and how often they complain. Now that's a lesson from which all readers, young and old, can benefit. It's available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other sites where books are sold. It's The Last Surviving Dinosaur, The Tyrannosaurus by Stephen Joseph. Joining us on the line right now from Calgary in Alberta, Canada. He is the author of a really, really cool book. We talk a lot about the importance of reading with our kids, and that is absolutely important. But I also believe that cooking with our kids is a wonderful part of parenting and being a family. Please welcome to the show the author of the Munchy Munchy Cookbook, Pierre Lamielle. Pierre, how are you?
I am super awesome. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
We're really excited to have you. Pierre was sharing with me that he spent a wonderful summer being a camp counselor outside of Boston. So we have that connection. That's very awesome.
That's right. It was a really, really beautiful summer, except for those torrential downpours.
Yeah, they can be they can kind of put a damper on your summer fun.
That's right.
Especially in one of the funky things about a lot of outdoor camps here in the Boston area is that they don't really have any indoor spaces. They might have an outhouse and they might have one cabin where they keep the supplies and everything, but otherwise they just assume that it's not going to rain all summer long, and on those days that it proves them wrong, the kids have to stay outside and get wet.
It's summer, it's warm, you're kids, you're supposed to be building up those immune systems.
There you go.
The rain, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the rain helps them grow. That's what we were told. So tell us about Munchy Munchy Cookbook.
Yeah, so it's a new book. I've been working on it for quite a long time, and the cool thing that really sets this book apart is the cast of characters, which is not what you're expecting to find in a cookbook, but there's this cast of characters that will show up and help tell a story. There's 7 characters. They all sort of represent a little bit of everybody who likes or doesn't like food and cooking. And they get along really well, and together they go on little adventures, but they also know a lot about food and impart that knowledge in a fun, engaging way for kids and adults as well.
I love that. You know, we've spent not as much time as I'd like talking with parents on this podcast about the value of cooking with kids. And I really do believe that it's valuable because as we're learning, a lot of what was thought to be common knowledge about nutrition isn't correct, or it's been updated. So it's we have to impart to our kids some new knowledge. But I also believe that just as reading with the kids is so valuable and is such a great way to grow closer together, certainly cooking with our kids and talking to our kids about the choices that we're making. It's a really great way to bond, and I think it's also a really great way to start talking to kids about their choices in regards to their health.
Definitely. There are great positive long-term effects for actually doing your own cooking, for sure. And you know what? Here's the thing that's really attractive to kids is for a while, that's an adult activity that they're not allowed to do. And if you get to engage them and start letting them into the kitchen, they'll be pretty excited about that because they get to start doing that thing that they weren't allowed to do. And yes, there are definitely dangers involved with knives and fire and hot things, but that's also pretty attractive. It's a fun, engaging activity to do, and it's good to get kids to grow a little bit of independence in that whole food cooking world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's absolutely, and there are dangers in the kitchen, but there's dangers in life, and a great way to start teaching kids about how to be safe in the kitchen and then out in the real world is in the kitchen while they're cooking with you, while you're there kind of helping keep them safe.
That's right. And it's okay for things to be a little bit scary when you're younger. It's more important to feel comfortable and safe and to have a better idea of what will happen if things go wrong. What happens if I do cut myself, or if some oil does splatter on me? Is this the end of the world? Well, is this the last time I'm ever going to stop cooking? Mm-hmm. Probably not, but that's okay. It's just a growing thing. And the better you get at it, the less likely you're going to hurt yourself. But on a positive note, you're still going to build these amazing skills that will benefit you in so many other aspects. I mean, this book isn't about education or teaching. It's a really fun book about food, but at the same time, kids are still going to learn a little bit about math and about measuring and about motor skills, which I think are really quickly diminishing. And cooking is a really simple activity that you really should be doing every day. And to build up those skills, to be able to cook every day is really going to benefit in the long term.
Mm-hmm. So give us a little example of how you weave these lessons about food and recipes in with the stories.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of food history that you can learn about. There's a lot of food science. There's all these various aspects of the food world. There's food production, farming, where food comes from, global cultures, different influences of ingredients on certain cultures. There's the actual physical act of cooking. So there's a lot of stories to tell in all different aspects of the food world. And sometimes the stories are educational, sometimes they're just more playful. And there's so many cool little comic strips in this cookbook. And that's, cookbook's not where you expect to find comic books, but they really help tell stories along the way. So one of them is where the kids decide to have the characters decide to have a chili eating competition. But a couple of them know that that's a really, really terrible idea. So they don't engage. And a couple of the ones that do engage and do end up getting the really spicy ones, well, they pay the consequences of it. But it's also done in a fun way. And that leads into a really great recipe for vegetarian chili, which is quite simple. Kids love chili, and it's really cool to show them how to make their own chili.
Really, really cool. And I love that idea of telling the story, telling a humorous story through comics and cartoons. And that gets the kids kind of interested. Let's sit down, read the story, and hey, that's funny. We had some fun times. Let's go in the kitchen and learn how to make that dish.
Definitely. And all the recipes are really approachable for kids too, so the kids will want to make those dishes. The photos are absolutely stunning. They're a little bit messy, so that level of finesse is not something kids are going to have to worry about. It's okay if things are a little bit messy, but the photos are so beautiful and delicious looking that even though they're a bit messy, everyone's going to want to eat the food. Mm-hmm. Adults, kids, it doesn't matter. Even though it looks messy, it's delicious. So that's going to get kids wanting to make these things. Also, there's a lot of familiar recipes in here. There's things that kids have probably tried, probably enjoyed, and they're going to want to know how to make those things on their own. And it's not going to freak them out.
Well, I love and can definitely relate to the messy. When I first got married, I had lived on my own for many, many years, which probably doesn't surprise anybody who looks at me. But when I met my beautiful wife, she hadn't had to cook for herself, so I cooked, and she was kind of horrified the first night. She came home, and the kitchen was just a mess. And I explained to her, that's why the food is so delicious, I had such a good time cooking it, and this went that way and that went that way. And don't worry, we can clean that up later on, but just let's sit down and dig into this delicious food together.
I'm pretty sure that's why they used to keep kitchens in the back. But now that they're moving them forward, it's nice to also know how to clean as you go along too.
Absolutely.
And you know what? For kids, that's a secondary concern. Kids are definitely going to want to be messy, and I think it's important for parents to just let their kids be a bit messy, not to worry about the cleanliness, just get them more interested in being a participant in the kitchen. That's a good big lesson, and it's a really hard thing for a lot of parents who want to be right there involved. They want to hover over top of the kid while they're using the knife. But really, I think if you just take a little bit of a hands-off approach, and an observational, role, that's going to help those kids develop the skills on their own and not feel too tense.
Right. And there's a lot of things that we can have our kids chop up that's safer to do than have them tackling a big round rolling onion right away. Start small,
Absolutely.
start safely.
There's a lot of intro vegetables. In fact, there's a really fun recipe for pumpkin pie soup. And it's not a dessert. It's a soup made with pumpkin pie spices. You get a little bit of whipped cream on top, and a really cool little technique for how to break down a squash without using a knife, because that is a really tricky thing, to try to cut into a squash, even for big, strong adults. So I've got this really neat thing where you put a squash in a tea towel and you grab the four corners and then you give it a good whack on the ground or on a hard surface. And kids love it. It's so fun. And adults love it too. Mm-hmm. And then you just arrange those little pieces of squash. Doesn't matter if they're different sizes. You just roast them all. And then you scoop everything out and put it into a blender and puree till it's pumpkin pie soup. And it's a really cool technique that is fun. It's super fun. And it also is a safety thing too.
Wow, I have just learned that this podcast is worthwhile for me because my family loves squash, and it is a bear to kind of cut into those things and to get them peeled and all right, I'm going to flip my wife out, but it's going to be great. I'm going to love this. Pierre, how did you get interested and motivated to write the Munchy Munchy Cookbook?
Oh, well, I've written a few cookbooks over the years. I've written Kitchen Scraps, a humorous illustrated cookbook, which is definitely not for kids. And then I did a great book for kids called Alice Eats. And that's an Alice in Wonderland based cookbook. And that was super fun to work on. But then I wanted to work on something that could then turn into a bigger series or a bigger picture. I wanted to continue this dialogue or this story. So what I did was I came up with these great characters, and I sort of wrapped my head around the idea of making a series of cookbooks. So this will be the first one. And hopefully if this goes well, we're going to be able to turn this one into a series of either picture books with smaller recipes or even more large format cookbooks like this one. This one's 160 pages. It's really a chance to introduce all the characters and sort of help show their various personalities. And then from there, we can do another big cookbook or a series of small books. So I'm really excited to see where this whole storyline goes. And I've gotten to know these characters over their development, and they're pretty cool, and they get along really well. Sometimes they don't get along that great, but they also work through it. And that's kind of what it's like being in a kitchen, whether you're actually working in a professional kitchen or you're just with your family at home doing some cooking. It's about getting along with different personalities, but the place to bring them all together is definitely in the kitchen.
Now, do you have a background as a chef?
I do. I'm a trained professional chef. I went to the French Culinary Institute in New York City, which is now the International Culinary Center. I've also done a bit of that competition stuff on TV. I was on Top Chef Canada, did pretty well, and then I also was on Chopped Canada, won that. And so I'm familiar with some of the, professional level cooking, and I can hold my own in the kitchen. But what I really want and what's really important to me is talking about food, just food and feeding yourself. And I really think that the world is not about competition in the food world. It's more about collaboration and sharing. And I feel like things are definitely steering towards competition, which is not an everyday occurrence, and food is an everyday occurrence. So I think that it's really important to embrace a more communal food culture than a competitive one.
One of the things you talked about, or you just touched on it earlier on, is that this is a great book for kids who love to eat and some kids who don't love to eat. That was one of the things that amazed me, is that there are some kids who just seem like like they don't like to eat. Do you have any insight into why that is and how we can better connect with those kids to help them experience eating as a really fun, positive thing?
Definitely. That's a really big thing. And unfortunately, that's a bigger topic that I can get into individual reasons for. I've definitely come across it myself, just, working with kids, teaching cooking classes where you get some kids that on a certain day, they're not going to eat chicken that day. And that's all there is to it. One of the characters in the book, I've got these two little opposing characters. One is Ragu, and he's a raccoon, and he eats everything. Copious amounts of it. He makes himself sick sometimes, but he has no problem eating absolutely anything. Then there's Ziti, and she's a lot more picky. In fact, there's only one thing that she eats, and I'm not going to give it away. Now, Ziti is really picky about food, but that does not mean that she is not included with the group. It's really important for her to be around the food and to make her feel like she's included in that little group. Because sometimes kids are not going to eat food for a variety of reasons. And that doesn't mean that they should not be included in the preparation of the food or in the eating of the food or the experience of eating. I think that if kids do get exposure to the actual cooking and they actually get their hands into the cooking, they're going to want to eat what they made because they had an engagement with it. But also just being around a lot more variety of food is good. Giving them some choices on how they're preparing the food, a little bit of creative freedom. That's really important too for engagement. So a lot of these topics are kind of covered off in the book without being overly taught. It's sort of told in the stories and how the characters interact with each other. But Ziti is always included, even though she's really picky, and sometimes she gets a little hangry too. But she's always part of the group.
That's great. That's great. Cooking is just such a wonderful, wonderful thing, and it's a great way to bond and to get to know people. I know my daughter's boyfriend loves to cook, and he and I've always been the one to cook here in the house and not needed a lot of help. But this past Thanksgiving, he was over and he's like, "Hey, can I help with anything?" And it's like we ended up preparing the Thanksgiving feast together. And it was a great way for us just to get to know each other, to talk in a kind of relaxed way, to, doing things that we enjoy, sharing some ideas, showing each other different techniques. And that's again, just a great way for parent and child to spend some time together.
Definitely. And that's the thing about the kitchen in general. Every single personality is represented in people who love food. Mm-hmm. There are definitely people who are picky about food, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be included in the whole, experience of it. And cooking with somebody is a really great way to get to know them as well. You get to know if they're creative, if they're enthusiastic, if they engage well, if they, all different aspects of personality really shine through in the kitchen. How they handle a bit of pressure, how they react to things going wrong, or how they don't react to things going wrong, or how they react when things are good. All different types of people. And really, at the end of the day, everybody has to eat every day. And how you do that and how you choose to, enjoy the different aspects of that is also really informative about who you are and what your personality is.
Awesome. Well, one of the things I love to do, we host international kids here in our home. We've had kids from Italy and from China and from India, and they've all taught me some different dishes. My beautiful daughter Sophia from Zhejiang in China taught me how to make the most delicious dumplings from scratch. It just starts out as flour and eggs, and we mixed it all together, and it was great. You've already shared a great technique for cutting and preparing squash. Can you give me a really quick little recipe, maybe a favorite Canadian dish other than Canadian bacon, because that's all I can think of, something that I can tackle, perhaps with my family or my daughter's boyfriend?
Definitely. Well, there's definitely a recipe for pancakes in the cookbook with a bit of variety and variations in it. That's for sure. But one of the recipes that actually just tells this story perfectly is Sage. Sage is a turtle. He knows a lot about food history and science, and he tells a story about back in the Ottoman Empire, which was a really expansive empire. It crossed over a whole bunch of different cultures. And they used to have this big party every year where they would bring chefs in from all the farthest reaches of the empire. And in order to be one of the chefs who would come into this party and get into the kitchen, where they would share ideas and techniques, and it was really collaborative. In order to be one of the chefs to qualify to come into this kitchen party, you had to be able to make a very simple dish, and that dish was rice. Rice is a really challenging thing for even the best chefs. I know a lot of really great chefs, that even on Top Chef, that have a tough time with cooking basic rice. And so in this in the cookbook, there's a simple recipe for basmati rice that comes out absolutely perfectly every single time, and that goes with the recipe for butter chicken. And so that's one really great recipe that you can use for the rest of your life. Knowing how to make rice properly will serve you infinitely throughout your entire life.
Mm-hmm. Well, growing up in a typical Boston Irish Catholic family, I never learned how to cook rice until I married my beautiful wife from Puerto Rico, and then it was a necessity. And thankfully, I've learned. But I'm gonna definitely check out that recipe because we just do the typical long grain white rice, but the basmati rice and I'm learning there are all these great different rices and different ways to prepare them. So I'm excited about that. Pierre, tell us where people can connect more with you and learn more about the Munchy Munchy Cookbook.
Well, I'm on social media, mainly on Instagram. So I'm going to be at Munchy Munchy Cookbook on Instagram. That's where you're going to find illustrations of the characters. You're going to see photos of the food, and also this book is designed in a totally different format than anything you've ever seen. It is a really cool, fun, engaging format for a book. Really easy to follow step-by-step instructions, which are going to be totally different than what you're used to, and you're going to love it.
Awesome.
You can also check out munchiemunchy.com for the website for updates and news and all that kind of thing. And hopefully if we can build this up, this is going to turn into a series of books too that will move on into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see great things. We forgot to mention early on that this is the Munchy Munchy Cookbook's being published by our friends over at Familius. And you know Familius always does some really great, unique and inventive things with books. They're really kind of taking books to the next level. And it sounds like they're doing that with the Munchy Munchy Cookbook. And I just can't wait to get my hands on it. We've been talking today about food and about loving food and about making food with our kids with the author of the Munchy Munchy Cookbook, Pierre Lamielle. Pierre, thanks so much for being on the show.
My pleasure, and it was really exciting to share this story with you guys, so hopefully you go check out the book and use it in the kitchen.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Rinda Beach. Rinda Beach, she'll be telling us about her wonderful Neil Armstrong's Wind Tunnel Dream book. It's really exciting where we're continuing our celebration of the 50th anniversary of man landing on the moon. You know, we love celebrating things here on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We love celebrating man's landing on the moon. We love celebrating great children's books. And if you are the author of a great children's book, we would love to have you as a guest on the podcast. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands and thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. All you need to do is to go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, click on the contact button, let us know about your great book. We will let you know the next easy steps. The next easy step for me is to say thank you to the people who made today's show so very wonderful. I want to thank my guest, Pierre Lamielle. Be sure to check out Munchy Munchy Cookbook. I also want to thank my friend Kate Farrell over at Familias. She has been such a huge help and brings so many great guests to the show, especially guests from Familias. We also want to thank our sponsors, Steve and Joseph. Be sure to check out The Last Surviving Dinosaur, the Tyrannosaurus. We want to thank our friends at Kid Curated Books. Receive a beautiful box of books specifically selected for your child from Kid Curated Books. And we also want to thank the author of With the Courage of a Mouse, Book 1 in the Superhero School series, Donna Sager-Cowan. Be sure to check out With the Courage of the Mouse. We also want to thank my producer, Fatima Khan. Fatima is so very, very important to the show. Be sure to check out her blog at readingwithyourkids.com. I also want to thank my beautiful wife for all of the support that she gives me. I want to thank Augie the doggy for watching my back here in the studio. And, of course, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.